It takes future-focused vision to find ideas that become solutions to the world's most pressing concerns. Innovation and creativity are the sparks that ignite to transform lives and society, and these need space to grow.
We are home to these creative and innovative sparks. Our work goes beyond the disciplines, across our 9 faculties, 7 campuses, and being one of Africa's top business schools. As an African global university, we stand proudly among the world's top universities. We remain at the forefront of universal discoveries and provide authentically African solutions to the world's greatest challenges and opportunities. We are pioneers in our fields, from the humanities to cutting-edge technologies, continually seeking ways to improve the world around us. Our hybrid learning systems provide quality education that enables graduates to become adaptable game changers. We have molded nearly 500,000 alumni who have made their mark locally and internationally, and we continue to inspire and equip our students to uphold our firmly rooted culture of excellence. At the heart of what we do is our people. They are creative, critical thinkers who can shape society for the better, because that is how we teach, learn, innovate, impact, and live. We are the University of Pretoria.
Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to those of you who are with us today in person and those of you who are joining us remotely by live stream. The WUN President's Forum for 2024, organised jointly with the African Research Universities Alliance, ARUA, will characterise research challenges of importance to Africa. It will focus on global challenges in which research in an African context can be particularly illuminating, and will highlight the research areas in which collaboration among members of international global networks like WUN and ARUA can be especially valuable. And we think that today's program will cover much of the territory we need to examine to discern the best opportunities for future development and collaboration. Ernest.
Thank you very much, Peter. The African Research University Alliance is very pleased that it's become possible to partner with the Worldwide Universities Network to have this year's President's Forum taking place here in Pretoria. We are particularly pleased because we've been looking for an opportunity to engage with WUN, and this has made it possible. So, Peter, thank you very, very much for inviting us to join you.
Thank you. We're privileged to be here today at the University of Pretoria's Future Africa campus, and I'd like now to invite Professor Themba Mozia, Vice Chancellor of the University, to offer his welcome.
Good morning, colleagues. I very briefly would like to say a few words. We were a little bit behind schedule, so I'll try as much as I can to capture what needs to be captured. But before I go further, just to thank, because usually we do it at the end and then start forgetting, the people that organize this for us, Mike, Peter, Rikas, and other colleagues in the team. Just to thank you very much for bringing us together here this week so that we can be able to make a contribution to all of these intractable problems that we have. and good morning to all of you colleagues. And we are truly delighted that, our partnership here, will take us further. We, as you heard from the two colleagues here, the Worldwide University Network board, we discussed and agreed and requested Arua to join us because it's all about partnership, it's about collaboration, it's about all the work that we do. Now, as the University of Pretoria, we're truly delighted to be hosting this conference. And University of Pretoria is fortunate to be, at the academic hub of South Africa. We have 4 universities in this province, or rather in this city, rather in Pretoria. We have the research councils, they are housed here. They have some satellites elsewhere in some of them. But the NRF, our National Research Foundation, is also housed here. South African Bureau of Standards, pretty much many of them. So that helps a lot in terms of networking, in terms of research, in terms of partnerships. And of course, we're housing the most embassies and consulates. I think half of my work is to greet ambassadors, form networks, travel, have strategic partnerships in different parts of the world. So we're truly delighted that this group of people here, whether you're online or with us here, will be able to get the contributions that will make a difference. We are truly, looking forward to a very robust engagement, and we are pretty sure that with all the fine minds that we have here, we will see change going on over time. There are many, many wicked problems in the world. There are huge challenges, and the expertise that we have around here spans across different areas of expertise. And through research and science, let us make a difference and bring people together. Let us make a change, because we are change agents. Now, at the University of Pretoria, we're truly delighted to have you here. We hope that you will feel welcome, and the organizers have, you'll be able to have refreshments and things like that. And Peter made sure that, you're well cared for when you're here. And thank you so much, colleagues. We're looking forward to a productive week ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure now to introduce our first keynote speaker, Dr. Peggy Ote-Boateng, who's the Executive Director of the African Academy of Sciences. And she will be talking about transformative research and innovation for the Africa we want, a call for equitable partnership. Dr. Ote-Boateng is currently the Executive Director of the African Academy of Sciences, based in Nairobi. And in her role as Executive Director, she leads and provides strategic direction to the Academy's programs. She's responsible for both the programmatic and operational management of the organization, with a focus on transforming lives through science, technology, and innovation for sustainable development. Dr. Ote-Boateng has previously held notable senior administrative positions, which include Director of the Division of Science Policy and Capacity Building, the Natural Sciences sector at UNESCO headquarters in Paris. Also, Senior Science Advisor for Natural Sciences sector, UNESCO. And before that, Senior Program Specialist for Science and Technology and Head of the Science Unit at the UNESCO Regional Office for Southern Africa and South African Development, community in Harare, Zimbabwe. So please welcome Dr. Otaboting for her keynote address. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, distinguished Vice Chancellors, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me. I don't know how that coin dropped to have me as the guest speaker, but I'm privileged and honored to be here. Well, I was asked to, indicate a topic, and I think I want to share with you, having spent 2 weeks ago in the African Union and looking for the future we want, the TISA 2024, and also having been part of the group looking for equitable partnership in Africa, and also from my work in UNESCO, see that how we can, we can link up and some of the missing gaps that we have. So the heading for my presentation is Transformative Research and Innovation for the African We Want, and we're calling for partnership. Well, just to give a brief overview, as introduced, I'm come from the academy, and it's one of the Global Academy of Science. I'll just give you a short outline about what we do and why we need to have, academies and universities. We find that it's a great synergy and opportunities, and we're pleased to be here. But I think we should carry the story forward and also share with you some of the models that we have developed over the last 40 years. And then opportunities for mid-career scientists and innovators. We need to develop the new generation. I'm sure most of you here maybe above 50, but we need to develop the new generation, and it has to start now. Then transformative, equitable partnership for all, and then conclusion. Who are we? We are a Pan-African institution, as indicated. We're non-profit. But what we like to do, and we continue to do, is that we're an Africa-led organization, and we drive sustainable development in Africa through thought leadership in science, technology, and innovation. We were established in 1984 by a group of African scientists, led by Professor Odiambo. We're recognized by the African Union, and that's what makes us, Pan-African, because we also have the convening power in Africa. We're also the voice for science for Africa. Our headquarters is in Nairobi, hosted by an agreement by the, government of Kenya. And we're present in all the, regional blocks, in Africa. I think it's also interesting to show you who we are. We have a governing, structure, the General Assembly, and then the Governing Council, and then we have fellows and affiliates. And for the first time in 40 years, we have a female, Professor Costin from this university, leading the academy. And then we have the secretary, the treasurer, Kenya, and then we have, 6 vice presidents. Professor Godfrey represents Central Africa. Kenneth represents Southern Africa. We have Paco Western. Eastern, we have Professor Zuma, Professor Raja. And then we have 3, elected members. And then we have a representative from the African Union, and then the executive director. So, and they all came in new, directing the affairs of the academy. Others were asking us, what do we do? I mean, in other countries that I've worked with, when I was in UNESCO, academies are a real resource for governments, but not only that, for also universities, because most of you, can be fellows, and you all come from universities, and we have all the pool, of institutions. We also have what we call the associate fellows. You don't necessarily have to be, African, because we have other people from America, from China, from Japan. And what we're also driving now is to get a lot, of our people from the diaspora. But we also have affiliates, because we run, training programs. We bring them together because we want to nurture them to be young, fellows. And as you would know, the history of academies is that they have a very stringent, recruitment policy. And sometimes good people are often also eliminated because of the stringent. We also want to see, a situation where we can have, young people, groom them. So what we're doing now to even, evaluate, like other academies are doing now, to be able to get more people. We are in 10 disciplines. So it's not just science, but the sciences. We're in 10 disciplines, but we're short of policymakers, policy scientists, and engineers and technology. So one of the focus is, driving is that if we can have many more of them, and we want you to nominate an affiliate, and hopefully when we finish, most of you vice chancellors in Africa, we're calling for fellowships this in June, just next month. Hopefully, most of you will also, be part of it. We, want also to bring in our, scientists from the diaspora. The new team has a new strategic plan. And we had we had high-level discussions, online surveys to actually determine, the new strategy. And the new strategy that, the vision is that we want to transform lives through science. And then we have a renewed mission. The old mission was we're leveraging on resources, but now what we want to leverage on is science, technology, and innovation for sustainable development to build the human capital, of Africa. Core values, integrity, diversity, excellence, empathy, collaboration through fairness. And this comes from the history we've had. And I'll, go into more detail. We're calling for equitable partnership with integrity, scientific integrity and scientific ethics. I think that's what has been missing in most of the collaborations that we had, over the years. We have 3 tripartite missions: recognition of excellence, that's fellowship, but we want to do that through, high prestigious fellowships and awards. Then think tank functions, providing advisory think tank function and foresight in shaping African science, technology, innovation strategies and policies. And as I speak, we're part of the group writing the new, TISA 2034, the African we want. So for us, this gathering is a very good opportunity for us to be able to have those thought leadership and also have, the new dynamic, the future, of science. And then a big program we ran over the last 40 years is training world-class scientists, research, and innovation. And recently, for the industrialization for the Africa we want. And we cannot do it alone. We need the universities, and most of the fellows are also from the university driving this. But how can we, accelerate that? We do that through, thematic, focuses: natural sciences, environment and climate change, social scientists, and we put social scientists in the middle because that drives, we can't do science without the social scientists. We need to enhance science, policy, society nexus. And that's why what many of us scientists are not doing very well. But we want to, accelerate that. Then policy and governance. Many scientists are not involved in policy and governance, particularly of countries. We're calling more scientists into this because we believe that science diplomacy can change the world. But scientists are not in there. And we can use evidence because we need evidence science. All this geopolitics. If only we had the evidence through science diplomacy, I think we can solve quite a number of the issues. And we encourage universities, to be able to do that. Health and well-being, yes, then talking about academies and university, I think we haven't done well as Africans in creating that synergy between academies and universities. But how do we do that? There are a lot of experiences from other parts of the world. For example, the University of Bologna, had most of its fellows, in there. Then we also have the Royal Society, those of you from the UK, very strong academies in the past. Some of the older scientific academies. And even in Africa, we even had one of the oldest universities in Timbuktu. But actually see the progression of scientific academies. Some of the oldest one you can see the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, 1970. The Ghana Academy of Sciences is one of the oldest, on the continent. But how many, of the university fellows, university lecturers, or deans are part of this. And then Nigerian Academy of Sciences, Morocco, and the Academy of Science of South Africa is about the youngest on the continent. But because they have good policies and strategies, many of you are talking about ASAF, even more than AS. So we were founded in 1985, and I think we need a lot of synergies. Why do we need that? Because this is a UNESCO information on 2022 about the future of education. And if you can see, if I can work this out well, sorry. If you can see the trajectory, we have many primary school, and then, it tapers off. And when it comes to, laureate fellows, in Africa, we don't have many. Why? Because of our education system. Education system has to be, we have to work together to be able to develop the Africa we want. And their vision, of Africa is that at least we should have 1,000 PhDs over 10 years. But we don't have that. It's not only in the sciences, but, generally, and research. We don't have many of that. You can see that, from age 0 to 4, it tapers out. But we have the demographic dividend. Africa has one of the youngest, population under 30. But how do we build those? Well, they are human beings, they are, people, but how do we build those capital? So we need to, we entreat universities and academies to work together so that we'll be able to build the African we want. And then what needs to change? Policy alignments, development aspiration. A lot of universities, still we, in our old fashion of, research, but how does it influence, development, particularly in Africa? We also need equitable partnership. One key one in Africa, data now is gold, but we need data governance. How do we do that? We need to optimize our systems to be able to do that. And then we need to have, think about science, as a public good for influence and foresight. Don't hide those scientific research. It doesn't matter, it doesn't work like that anymore. We have to open it up for others to use. It is only by using that we make it, credible for everybody. So I just want to take you, on a short, history of the academy, and how, I've just selected models which you can use. Yes, sometimes we want to develop things, but I think we also have models that we already have. How do we build on those models? So I just give you just a few of them. How have we strengthened innovation and capacity, over the years? We have nurtured next generation of African scientists and researchers and built Africa's human capital. And we're pleased to note that some of your vice chancellors and some of your pro-vice chancellors went through this program. And it's not just for science, but we give them extra in terms of leadership in policy design, leadership in policy formulation. And then we also, upgrade, research infrastructure through, cutting-edge research equipment and, infrastructure. But we also want to have, we want to transform higher education institutions, provide development for research to create world-class scientists and innovators through long-term, and I say long-term funding. One example is the CEDA, Swedish CEDA. Most of you have benefited from Swedish CEDA. Swedish CEDA does not give 1 year, 2 years, because they want to make impact. They give 5 years, they give 10 years, and they have cohort, and they monitor and they follow them, and that is what we're looking for. And even, our own funding institutions, this is what we're looking for, not just touch and go. Touch and go doesn't create that world-class, citizen. So how do we do that? Well, we build leadership. We also support development. We also identify and support writing research leaders, and then also fill the critical gaps. This we have done, for many years, and it's a model which, we can work together with the universities to really create the Africa we want. What are the areas we're in? Health and well-being. A bigger program we had for many years was genomics and bioinformatics. And sadly, Africa's genomic data is not used by Africa. We have, partners, they find this as gold, they use it, pharmaceutical companies use it, but Africa has not woken up to the use of our genomic, bioinformatic data. And I encourage universities, to partner, north, south, triangular collaboration, and see how we can make this work for, Africa's development. Also sustainable energy, which is, all over, and then STEM programs. One of the key areas budding is big data science. I know South Africa is involved in that, but we need more universities to look at big data science, computer engineering, just even mathematics. How do we make, mathematics work, for us? Then food security, yes, we need to feed all the almost 1 billion or 2 Africans that we have. But not only that, but globally. Very soon food will become a problem. Are we developing new technologies, for doing that? And climate change and adaptation. I put this as climate financing because that's an area which many universities are not in. But those from the climate financing tell us there are billions of dollars, but we don't know how to get it. It is. One of our colleagues is there, and he said, look, Africa is not there at all. Can universities train, leaders in Africa for this climate financing? So it's not just the North getting it, but also Africa. And how do we do that? Through collaboration between North, South, triangular collaboration, because there's big dollars there, but we're not harnessing it. And then urbanization. We talk about water, sanitation, but one of the new part of the problems is urbanization. You go to Nairobi now, skyscrapers everywhere. Here, you have problem with, so how do we, universities, look into the future to develop the world-class scientists in these areas? Some of these are programs, but one of them that I want to harness on is a Delta program, which is a program that was run between 2015 to 2000 by the Academy in collaboration with private institutions, donor, and also, government. very good program where we created nodes, of scientists, all over the world, but also mainly in Africa. How do we use these models so that we look at it? Remember, I said science, policy, society interface. How do we do that so that we don't only produce university graduates for now, but also university graduates for the future that we want. Yes, so just one of the programs that we're running now, we have a 25 million program with the European Union. And it's a collaboration between the European Union and the African Union. And the African Academy of Sciences, it's in partnership with them. And one of the main objectives that we want to strengthen Africa's science base through open and direct continental competition for funding among the very best young African scientists, with the aim of creating knowledge-based and innovation-led continent. Just a quick one, what they are. They are in 5 main areas: capacity building for science and education. We have public health, innovation, and then green transition. Here we have 47, investigators or principal investigators in 38 countries, and each of them supposed to, train PhD students and, master students. So from the count now, we have 500, scientists, from this 47 investigators. And this is a model that we have developed, over time. And this is a model that we can all use to create those innovators that we want. The other one is the African Postgraduate Training Initiative. In Africa, we train students for PhD, but we don't give them the opportunity to have postdoctoral. I know South Africa, you have a program, many programs like that, but we'll encourage many universities to do that, and we can do that together. And academies are good places to partner with. This program, the cohort spend 1 year in Africa and the other year in America. And this is a joint program with the NIH and the Gate Foundation, and the African Union, creating, world-class, science. But this one is mainly in the health sciences. So what lessons have we learned? The critical, success factors that we need to have availability and access to science, adequate stakeholder engagement and buy-in, equitable partnership around R&I, and also we need to create an enabling environment and framework and instrument, to be able to do that. Sustainable, equitable partnership. We need agenda setting, financing. We need to co-design and co-implement and co-share, because a lot of the time we don't do that, but this is what we're calling for over time. And then we also have challenges, but we think as I indicated, there's an opportunity for us to do that. So some of the opportunities that we see: open science, I'm sure you're all aware of it, repository of our information. How do we create repositories of data in Africa so that our students don't start from scratch? They should leapfrog, but not to start from scratch. How do we create that? So the African Union, creating, through open access, or open science. And we know South Africa has the, open science platform. Can we, strengthen, these things? And also being part of, having worked in UNESCO, and also there's huge opportunity in the UN system, but many universities are not linked to the UN system. Can we all find an inroad, into that? And then young academics and diaspora fellows, can we have policies in Africa so that we can bring our diasporas back, to Africa? Because sometimes the policies are not inviting, so they come and they leave. Can the governments, together with universities, make sure that we have, so that we can retain them. And also science diplomacy, as I said, it's a huge area now. And also the geopolitics. Our universities in science diplomacy, and what are the perspectives of futures in, in STI in Africa? Here we are, futures, future Africa. Are we collaborating with them? And then climate financing, I've already said. Then digital transformation. How do we do that? Africa, not that we're left behind, but we need to do a bit more to be able to catch up. But we need to shape policies and investment to optimize progress in the digital and applied sciences. And this is the future. So if we're not in there, I think we should. Then, equitable partnership. This, again, Professor Ayete, Isabel, and the group here at Moyo, this is something that is close to our heart, that we need equitable partnership has to respect Africa ownership. Equitable to ensure that researchers and institutions are at the forefront of identifying the challenges that matter most to the community and shaping research agenda. We need to have shared expertise and also culturally appropriate local and indigenous knowledge systems, should also be harnessed. Equitable partnership in action, shared ownership, capacity building, cultural solution. What are the future? We need empowered communities. Sustainable development, we need global collaboration, but we'd also need thriving economies. And we can't do that alone, and that's why we find you as partners from Europe, from Asia, from Latin America, from America. Let's work together. And let's not also identify thriving economies for the future. Agriculture, we need to feed ourselves. Energy, key, and also AI and data science, for imperative development. We also need to foster an ecosystem of innovation, invest in research infrastructure, open science. We need to also build bridges, and also we are calling, a call for action that together, let's shape the Africa we want through transformative research and innovation. So we need to reimagine education for the future we want for Africa. It's not business as usual. Whether it's in Africa, Europe, and all, we are creating the human capital for the future. So we need to reimagine it so that they can be useful. In conclusion, roadmap for excellence. What is a roadmap? Just a thought. And that we need ambitious and visionary strategic plans with actionable steps and roadmaps, which are for achieving transform global sustainable development with the education and science as key enablers. We also need, the roadmap should be crystallized of aspirations, charting a path laced with rigorous evaluation and an unwavering suit of knowledge. We have policies, we don't evaluate. Universities, how often do we even evaluate our courses, how relevant they are? This should be part and parcel of what we do as universities, as academies, or as institutions or industry. We also need to execute collective vigilance in continuous monitoring and evaluation and safeguard elements of action with the same values of organization or institution. Then the prospects and opportunities in education and science are huge. But we need to work together to be able to do it at multiple levels, transdisciplinary level, and also agile, levels to be able to do that. We also need to convene and engage different actors to reframe and to rewrite and to reimagine the Africa we want for Africa. And how do we do that? Well, the Academy, in partnership with some of you, are doing that. But we cannot do it alone. So we invite all of you to join us in making science work for the sustainable development for the Africa we want, 2063. Thank you very much.
We have a little time for questions if you'd like to put them to Dr. Ote Boateng. One here. We can get your mic.
Thank you so much. Okay, can I be heard? Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for the great presentation. It was really good listening to you speak today. So I do want to follow up with a question about the infrastructure component of your talk today. Would you be able to give us a sense if there's any really intentional push around building research infrastructure across the continent, with respect to universities, and if yes, are there pockets, within the continent where there's some focus on building that infrastructure a bit more, right? Because that, as you mentioned, is very important. Without the tools, people can't do the work, and we can't do the training, right? And by the way, I'm Andre McDonald from the University of Alberta. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. As I speak, UNESCO is looking at mapping the infrastructure capacity and capabilities of Africa. So we invite all universities to be part of it. But how have we done it as the African Academy of Sciences? For example, the ARISE program, we give $500,000 to each of the principal investigators. And one of the components is infrastructure development. For example, University of Ghana, we just recently recently gave them an equipment which they couldn't, they didn't have before for climate change research. We have, for example, again, in University of Ghana again, there's a consortium and also give, those kind of equipment. But I must say, yes, what we need to do now is to build that infrastructure that we want, for the future. Maybe not only the universities, but also this is where the industries come in. We haven't, harnessed the potential of industries. I mean, in the North, industries give a lot of infrastructure to universities. Can we do that? Can we entice the African, to do it? And also the African government must invest in science. We should stop the lip service. And this is where we are. Maybe with a lot of other experiences, we'll be able to continue to learn from them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mehar? The microphone here, please.
Thank you very much. I think, thanks for your wonderful talk. The topic about equitable partnership in research collaboration. I think that there are many ways for us to work together. I'm just wondering whether in Africa, as an academy, whether there are regulations or protocols or guidelines regarding research data, including the research data that is generated with subjects or with environment and so on and so forth in Africa. I think that many of these guidelines can be as tight as they need to be or as open as they can be. On one hand, to facilitate open collaboration, open science, but on the other hand, protecting the researchers in Africa, achieving an equitable partnership. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Sorry. Yes, and thank you for that question. But, having driven the UNESCO Open Science, which we have now, we say you open as possible and as close as necessary. There are some data, for example, I talk about genomic data, we should be able to close some, but also open, much as we can. But again, equitable partnership, and the reason why even our new values, we have integrity, is that the African Academy of Sciences has been beaten really hard over the years. Those of you who know, we've been following the African Academy of Sciences. We had partnership with industries, I'll skip the name. They were able to convince two-thirds of the academy staff to establish a new entity. And why? Because the donors, because the academy said, no, we need to protect some of our data. We need to do exactly what you're saying. And they didn't, buy it. And then we also had other Africans who were able to do that. And they moved. And that's not equitable partnership. But I'm glad that now, the UK and others, have woken up to that. And that, they're really pursuing that equitable partnership. Because if we don't respect each other, then we can't have a world, for the future that, we want. So yes, we agree with you, but we have a long way to go. And I'm sure Isabel and Co will be able to deal into detail in that. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Rashid Siraj from Mohammed VI Polytechnic University in Morocco. Thank you very much for such an inspiring talk. Of course, you touched on so many issues, the key points of how do we reimagine, how do we transform the whole education system for L&D. My question is very simple. As we look at those roadmap and the numbers we need, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of new scholars and PhDs and all that. But in the same time, if we look at UNESCO numbers and stuff, Africa is sometimes losing its best brains in this brain drain. How do we reverse that trend? How do we make sure that the people we train would remain to do the job in Africa? Is there some kind of a vision on that? Thank you.
Yeah. That's an area that everybody talks about. But if you don't create the environment for them, they will go. And I'm sure those of you from America, the US is driven, it's on the wings of developed countries, tech. Whether you're doctors or nurses or researchers, how many of the Asian, Indians, are there? If you go to Silicon Valley, they're full of Indians, they're full of Asians, and elsewhere in Africa. But we are saying brain gain, bring them back, collaborate with them if they don't want to come. And it's a global world. I mean, now we're all looking for prospects. So if it's not good here, why not? But they have gained that experience, so bring them back. For example, I was in UNESCO, but I'm back in Africa. I'm one of them. I've decided to come back. I had opportunity to stay in Europe. I said, no, I've had enough. Let me come, and work in Africa. So we should be able to bring people there, back to be able to do that. So, I cannot, say more. But we also need more fellows. We need a think tank. We need advisory networks. Please, all of you, you're all potential, fellows of the academy or affiliates or, associate. Most of you can be associate. You don't need to be an Africa. You work in Africa, you can be an associate. And it's only through that we can, make our voices heard, particularly in science diplomacy.
Thank you. Last question, please, Richard.
Thanks very much. Richard Follett, University of Exeter in the UK. And I just wanted to start with, thank you for your presentation, which was really interesting. But you touched on a really important point, the role of governments, but also, I think, the role of corporates and corporate entities in this. And I was thinking that the Tertiary Education Fund in Nigeria set up its centers of excellence and have supported those, about 26 of them across all the different parts of the country. But at the heart of those is a requirement for the Nigerian university to work with a foreign university in an equitable partnership model. And that was driven by the government, by the Ministry of Education. Yeah. I think it's a really good example of the ways that we can support national governments, state governments, to assist. And I just wondered if you had some thoughts on how we can support governments across sub-Saharan Africa to develop exactly what you've described.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And again, I wear the hat from my previous experience, in science policy. A lot of, academics, are not into science policy. We wanted to engage people, we didn't get, particularly in Africa. But that's precisely that. We must train, our students, our world class, to understand those policy dynamics. You don't have to be in politics to do policies. So, be part of the policy that, the think tank, and inculcate that, in our students. And some of our students will finally be in government. And one of the programs we used to run and also with the university here is training of parliamentarians. Very key. How many universities have got programs to bring in parliamentarians and train them? When they are, for example, South Africa, you're going to have your election on the 29th of May, when they're doing the induction, do you go there to also be part of the induction? In terms of looking at this nexus I'm looking at, science, policy, and society, to look at it, because they are going to give you the funding. But a lot of us shy away. So we used to run programs for, equitable scientific partnership with parliamentarians. Can you do that? Can one of the universities, WUN, can you check that out? No, I mean, elections are happening in the US. You're going to have, I don't know who. Yeah. Elections are happening in Ghana. I don't know who. But how are we training these people to be involved, to be real humans, to look at the nexus of science, society, and policy? The future is ours, universities and academics, to be able to do that. These are the things that we need to do and leapfrog into the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much. We now move to the first regular session of the program, and this is a discussion of establishing equitable partnerships, follows on naturally from the keynote. And this will be moderated and introduced by Professor Shadi Ogunsola, who is the Vice Chancellor of the University of Lagos. Shadi, please.
First of all, let me say good morning to everybody, and that it's really great to be here. I'm not a member of the Worldwide Universities Network, but of ARUA, and so I'm very happy to be here. First of all, I want to thank Professor Peggy Boateng for setting the stage. We all agreed that Africa is the future. With 1.4 billion people, we're growing at a faster rate than most continents, and we're the youngest continent. And clearly, research has to take into consideration this new population that's going to come out. And there's been a lot of work around research. At the beginning, it was like extractive research, but it's becoming more equitable. And clearly, equality is not the matter. It's about how do we take care of the disparities. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking, but I think certain things have come through, that whatever we do has to be long-term. We have to take the long-term view. We have to plan together at the beginning. And so I'm going to invite two people to come here and discuss equitable partnerships. Professor Sue Harrison will be the first speaker. She's currently the Executive Dean, Engineering, Architecture, and IT at the University of Queensland since January 2024. Previously, she had a long career at the University of Cape Town, South Africa, first as an academic in chemical engineering, and then the National Research Chair in Bioprocess Engineering. And most recently, since 2019, she is the DVC Research and Internationalization. In this role, she has worked closely with both ARUA and WUN and chaired the academic advisory group at the WUN. And both in her research into sustainable development of mineral resources and in championing UCT's research vision and contributes to the grand challenges, she came to realize that equitable research partnerships are central to development and critical for continued useful research. So I'd like to invite Sue Harrison to come to the front. I would also like to invite Isabella Aboderi, the second speaker. She is the chair in Africa Research and Partnerships and director of Perivoli Africa Research Center at the University of Bristol. She's a chair in Africa. She's a professor of gerontology in the School for Policy Studies at the University of Bristol. Her research focuses on understanding and shaping necessary change in Africa Global North research relations and on questions of aging, intergenerational relations, and care in African context. Isabella joined the university in 2020 from the African Population and Research Center in Nairobi, where as a senior research fellow, she established and led a research and policy engagement unit on aging and development in Africa, which brought together major academic practice and policy constituencies in the region and shaped major continental policy frameworks on the issue. In prior positions, she served as Associate Professor for the Center for Research on Aging at the University of Southampton and was a Senior Research Fellow at the Oxford Institute of Population Aging, University of Oxford, and the World Health Organization Technical Officer in the Aging and Life Course Unit. Alongside her role as Extraordinary Professor at Northwest University, South Africa, Isabella is a member of the National Academies of Science Global Commission on Health v. Longevity, the Advisory Board of Future Africa at the University of Pretoria, and the Board of Trustees of the United Nations International Institute on Aging and the Population Reference Bureau. I would like at this time to also invite Dr. Isabella Aboderi to come here to the front. And you can see from the diversity of their backgrounds, but also that they are unified in Africa's research in Africa, that we're also going to get some perspectives on policies. How does science drive policy? So I will invite Sue Harrison, first of all, to come to say a few words, and I would suggest maybe about 20 minutes so that we can have some time after for questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the welcome, and thank you very much for having me speak today, having to accept that I'm no longer a member of either the WUN or ARUA in my new role. I wanted very much to be able to speak about equitable partnerships and research and the journey towards a holistic approach to true partnership. So increasingly we understand that global challenges do not know borders and that the need for and that we need global solutions. And increasingly we understand that the world has not used its resources equitably and it's not generated wealth equitably. We have so many examples of how, for instance, natural resources have been harvested or extracted at location A by people from location B to benefit location B, but leaving a costly legacy for location A. And examples of this are in extractive mining and timber harvesting and access and use of water and agricultural lands, and so we can go on, both within and across countries. And this is the backdrop to how we partner. So, as we acknowledge all of this, many parts of the world are now seeking to set things straight, sometimes driven by principles of setting out to right the wrongs of the past, and sometimes driven by seeking the survival of our planet. And we recognize that setting things straight needs us to work together, to work in partnership, and particularly to do so in research. But how do we partner? Who leads this? Whose knowledges do we rely on? And how does our work find traction? So currently, This is mostly driven by those who fund the research, those who've demonstrated major research productivity, and those who are seen as senior knowledge holders with superior access to facilities and so on. But these are built on the inequalities of the past, and so it cements the inequities that we see. And so our interest in and acknowledgement of the need to partnership, whether this is an academic partnership in the same university, academic across institutions and countries, academic industry, academic government, and so on, forms a pivot point to enable much, much more. Are we making progress in these partnerships? Yes and no. We have shared interests, but our progress is still slow towards truly equitable partnerships. And why? Well, I think we will not achieve ideal productive partnerships until we build a deep understanding of what equitable partnership really is. And in my mind, there are four main considerations in equitable partnerships and what they center on. The first is, who drives the agenda of the partnership? The second, who has access to the data that's been generated, exactly as Dr. Boateng spoke earlier? The third, what are the key components that ensure the success of the study, and are all of these recognized? And finally, who, how, and to whom are the results and outcomes of the partnership study reported, and with what impact? So I'd just like to address each of these briefly. So on who drives the agenda, typically the lead PI, defined as the one securing the grant and sourcing the funding, has the major say over the agenda. Yes, we agenda set together, but often the projects are so well set up, particularly when it's project-driven, by the time that all the partners are in, that the PI has a very strong lead there. Typically, the Global North PIs ensure the use of to ensure the use of the substantial research support facilities. But when we are addressing a research question which is pertinent to more than the environment of the PI, are they the holders of the comprehensive understanding of the problem? Is it not the understanding of regional aspects, of cultural aspects, and others critical in the agenda setting? And should there not be a strong contribution to agenda setting by those from where the biodiversity comes and who are steeped in the practices of the region for implementation? So that's on agenda setting. Who has access to the data generated? The access to the data generated drives who can contribute to the deep analysis and who can take the study forward past the project into a lasting partnership. And I think our previous speaker really spoke to some of the key aspects here. There are so many stories of how the data collectors in a region end up with no access to the data they collected and no ability to work with it moving forward. This obviously requires proper data management plans. It requires open access to some degree, but also really thinking through the governance of this data. The third is on what are the key components to ensure success of the study, and are these recognized? Well, funding is obviously a key component. But as well as that, many of the kinds of work we do in partnership require a study site. They require cultural understanding of the study site, which often impacts or enriches the understanding of the research question, a sense of ownership of the results that the study yields. If dependent on people, the ability to converse and to communicate through language skills, and in experimental studies, access to specialty equipment and computing power. So questions 1 and 3 really bring to us the value of co-creation, an approach that allows us to bring together perspectives and knowledges and to use these to formulate our best research question, to gather data with integrity and to analyze it in context. Co-creation is hard. It often takes us out of our comfort zone, but it's a critical tool for our future. And for those who visited UCT earlier this week, you will have seen the focus on building co-creation capacity at the University of Cape Town through our School for Design Thinking, where you were for part of the day. And the other example which would have been there is the work in innovation of medical devices discussed with Sudesh Srivastava, where the way in the device needs to be used and the community in which it needs to be used is taken into account in how those innovations are made. In the environment that I am in now, in Australia, such co-creation opportunities with the First Nations people are key focus. And this can be illustrated through the exploitation of a fibrous grass, spinifex. It's a hard indigenous grass growing in the arid northern half of Australia, which has been used for many years by the First Nations people. This grass has a very unusual fiber structure, and it is enabling the formation of very thin membranes, much, much thinner than previously formed, with great strength. It has the potential to replace latex membranes with great advantage. And here the growing and harvesting methods for the grass are being developed in alignment with the huge traditional knowledge of the First Nations people. And this is brought together with high-value nanotechnology. And the benefits expected through commercialization is being worked through as a cooperation of the First Nations people and the scientists. So I thought I should just dwell a little bit on co-creation there. And then the final question: who, how, and to whom are the results and outcomes of partnership studies reported, and with what impacts? And here, I think, firstly, we must talk about the importance of the results of our partnerships, our research partnerships, going far beyond academic knowledge, but being able to go into policy documents, being able to be communicated to our parliamentarians, as you referred to earlier on, to governments, to our state governments, and so on. And we need to think about how we do that. But I also want to just go down a little bit of an excursion on things about communication that really hamper our equitable partnerships now. And I want to talk about three. The first is helicopter science. We may think helicopter science is a thing of the past. It certainly is not. Where researchers from outside come into a community, gather their data, the only thing the community do is gather the data. The knowledge goes back to the senior partner in inverted commas, and gets worked, analyzed, and reported by them. Often the data collectors aren't even there. It's not a thing of the past. I come from a university. I do my research at the University of Cape Town, a premier university in Africa. Within the last 6 months, my team were asked to join a project in just such a way to gather the samples, pass them over. All the interesting molecular biology would be done on the other side. All the application, even the engineering principles, of which our team is a world-renowned group, would be done somewhere else. It is not dead. Are we part of that project? No, we are not. The second thing I'd like to speak to is who gets to speak, who gets to present the research outcomes at big meetings. I think our conference organizing committees are doing a great job on trying to make sure that we get everybody speaking, that we have great diversity in presentation. But the issue of visas is a real issue. And just recently, Sandra Owasa wrote in Nature World Review of her experience in seeking to present her work at the European Congress on Tropical Ecology as an invited speaker. Despite all the letters of support, multiple letters of support that probably more people more than many of us in the room have ever had to ask for, her visa was rejected for no substantive reason. Of the 10 speakers from low middle income countries in her session on wild meat, only 4 got visas. Biodiversity needs low middle income country input because they're impacted by it and they need to implement the policies. But our migration policies do not allow this. Visa rejection is especially true for Africa and Asia, often following a substantial cost, maybe $1,500 in traveling to visa agencies, applying for visas, etc. And again, this means that the voice of the scientists from a certain subsector of our research community is simply not heard. And thirdly is the issue of how work is published. Who has access to published work, and how they and whose work do they have access to? So open access publishing has been really made inroads here, and one may think that this is a done deal. Global North countries, all researchers all publish open access. Nothing is behind paywalls. and it's easy to access. And in the less wealthy nations, it is true, we can access all of that information which has come from that sector of our research community. But in less wealthy countries, we can't necessarily afford to publish open access. The tariff of publishing open access may be 40% of a master's or a postgraduate student stipend. So you have a decision to make as to what you're going to do. And when the less wealthy nations need to publish their work behind paywalls, it may be read by the global north, but it isn't read by their neighbors. It isn't read by the country next door. And so there's still work to be done about open access. And I will say there's wonderful work being done. And in South Africa, we have really managed to achieve great negotiations with publishing houses, but there's still work to be done. So I want to progress now from those examples and talk about in progressing the journey towards equitable partnerships in research in particular, but also teaching and learning. For me, there are two concepts that we really need to think about. The one is how we're transformative, and the other is how we're holistic. So transformative, causing a major and lasting positive effect for the best to something or someone or some way. Holistic, interconnected to consider the whole in a way that takes consideration and includes both the collective and the individual or the component purposes. As DVC Research and Internationalization at UCT until the end of last year, I was privileged to be part of a team of 3 universities championing this approach through the conceptualization and the launch of the African Charter, an African-centered framework for advancing transformative mode of research collaborations that will serve to advance and uphold the continent's place in global production of scientific knowledge. Africa's long-term trailing position in being accredited for research production, as well as in positioning the knowledge from Africa in formal presentation globally, has made this intervention critical. The descriptions up front of my talk today make this need clear, and Isabella Abodiran and WUN, who are both present, will address this next. But I want to bring out a few key components at this point, because they will illustrate how we, or how the worldwide university network, may prioritize to move forward. Firstly, we need a transformative approach to partnership to advance global production of scientific knowledge in all regions, including knowledge from the oppressed and disadvantaged regions and communities. Secondly, we need to value knowledge with origins in different systems and different cultures, looking at knowledge for what it brings and contributes, not whether it follows convention. This enables us to both maximize our innovation and our understanding. And thirdly, we need to recognize what knowledge is global, with global impact, and what is impacted by region and location, because this really impacts our partnership. So, for example, I'll be a scientist here, gravity. Well, gravity is experienced in the same way anywhere on our Earth's surface, because it relates to the mass of the Earth, which is the same anywhere on Earth's surface. CO2 in the atmosphere, or methane, or nitrous oxide, impacts us wherever we live, and removal methods have the same global relevance, because wherever it gets generated, it impacts us all. But for instance, and this is a trivial example, rains fall differently based on climate, and so flooding or erosion patterns are different, and so agricultural practices and geotechnical structures will need to be different based on where we are regionally. And this is also true with cultural responses and the way in which we live. So if I return briefly to the Africa Charter, we seek to address ways of partnering in research for the benefit of Africa. We acknowledge the critical role of Africans and African institutions in guiding how this is done. We knew the Charter was important for many reasons. This is because equitable partnerships are so important because they allow us to deal with critical problems of the world, because we know we must set the research agenda together, and we know that work in a truly equitable way will give voice and agency for all, and so allow better knowledge generation. But we did not expect the groundswells of signatories that this charter received. When we went to the Congress of Rectors and Vice Chancellors in Africa, in Windhoek, Namibia, in July 2023, we hoped for maybe 40 signatories. We received 86, and now it's well over 100. Isabella will tell you just now what it is. And this demonstrates the recognized importance of the Charter. What is clear is that the Africa Charter for Research will add depth to the approach to equitable partnerships that speak to the core mission of the WUN. And the WUN has shown amazing readiness to consider the need for equitable partnerships. Already, all WUN members from Africa, as well as a number of other WUN members as individual universities, have signed the Charter. I will leave it to Isabella to bring us this detail, but I'd like to close with a few take-home messages that are not affected by whether we are in Africa or the Americas or Asia or the Pacific Rim or anywhere. And my key point is that the building of equitable research partnerships is a journey along a road to a holistic approach to true partnership. For me, it is one of the most important things universities can do in our current world to build both knowledge that is cutting edge and relevant, and expertise and people with expertise that can implement it in a manner that benefits the peoples and societies of our globes and the globe itself. And it is in building this understanding that underpins equitable partnership as we stand to succeed in valuing each other, something that our world currently really needs us to do. So I want to leave you with a few questions to guide our journey. And I think resolving these is key to partnership quality within the WUN and Arua. And my take is that both networks have embarked on this journey with intention. So the first question comes back to something I said earlier. How are equitable partnerships led? Is it a single lead or a team? Who leads? Who follows? And are these positions constant? We really need to think through this and why we would do it that way. Who or what sets the agenda? We need to move beyond the notion that the entity with the funding sets the agenda. Funding is a critical, non-optional component of research, but it is not the only, and it's not even necessarily the most important. There's much of our research that we can't do without the right study sites, without the right cultural understanding, etc. If it is not the funder, then what are the critical components that inform agenda setting? And how do we design this together? So big or grand challenges need effective partnerships across the world, as we are all impacted, and therefore across the global north and the global south. And from these partnerships will grow knowledge leaders from across the world and the knowledge for impact. And then finally, not quite finally, second to finally, what stands in the way of delivery? Well, often it's the infrastructure and the appropriate governance systems, and we need to find ways of building these broader. And hats off to those philanthropic groupings which are starting to do this with us in Africa. The need to integrate the knowledge generated with cultural priorities and expectations of communities where it can have impact. Do we build towards this right from the start? So often not, but we can, and it will really help our work. So when I was leading Future Water, which is an interdisciplinary research institute at UCT, I quickly came to understand that technical solutions to South Africa's very real water challenges are the easy part, but they have no value if one cannot embed them in the cultural fabric of how people live, of community, industry, power dynamics, and one needs to do this respectfully and deeply. And that brings us back to co-creation. So in Africa, there's an important adage, nothing for us without us. And I think that brings me to my final point of how do we build shared benefit together through our equitable partnerships, cross-cutting cultural divides, nationality belief systems, and centered knowledge. And I think we do this through mutual participation, through mutual trust and respect, through truly valuing each partner. And this gives us a strong starting place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. I'm not going to say too much because I'm going to invite the next speaker. But some of the things that came through, that there's a lot more to be done. We need to do a lot more on the African continent when we're doing research together. This research needs to be empowering, co-creation in setting the agenda is important, very difficult. We're not yet out of the woods with helicopter research. And for us to move forward, there has to be more trust, more respect, and we have to value knowledge from irrespective of where it's coming from. and that we have no choice really, because a lot of the challenges of the world is affecting us all the same way, although there are some that impact us based on our geographical location. But there's still a lot more to be said. So I'm going to recognize one more person. I'm sorry I missed you out. Divine Fu, who will be talking with Isabella. Divine is from Bafut in Cameroon. He's an associate professor of anthropology and the director of the Institutes for Humanities Africa at the University of Cape Town. His research focuses on the politics of suffering and smiling. That's a very popular thing in Nigeria. And if any of you know Fela, the musician, he has a music, his music says suffering and smiling. We're good at that. Particularly on how urban youth seek ways of smiling in the midst of their suffering. He has done work in Cameroon, Botswana, Senegal, and South Africa. And his new research focuses on the political economy of African knowledge production and on centering African epistemologies in artificial intelligence and the ethics of being in African contexts. He is the co-chair of the Global Africa Group of the World Universities Network and vice president of the African Studies Association of Africa. So both Isabella and Divine are going to speak, and I think you'll be speaking first. Okay, thank you very much. Please come.
Thank you. So, good morning, Vice Chancellors, Presidents, colleagues, friends. It's quite hard to overstate what an honor it is to speak to you this morning and to share some reflections in more detail on the Africa Charter for Transformative Research Collaborations. And in many ways, I will build directly on some of the leads that Sue has left us with. So as Sue has already mentioned, the Africa Charter for Transformative Collaborations is an Africa-centered framework for thinking about how we need to configure collaborations between actors in the continent and those outside of the continent, in particular the global north. It was launched almost a year ago in July in Windhoek last year, and it was co-created by the major higher education constituencies in the continent, the logos of which you see up there, the AAS, ARUA, the African Association of Universities, CODESRIA, and so on and so forth. So it was really an effort that was led from the continent. The initiative was facilitated by 3 institutions, as Sue has mentioned already, specifically HUMA at the University of Cape Town, the research chair, the Albert Luthuli Research Chair at UNISA, the University of South Africa, and us, the Perivoli Africa Research Center at the University of Bristol. What we, actually Divine and I, would like to do in the next 10 to 15 minutes or so is the following. We want to first draw your attention to some of the foundational queries about equitable partnerships that in particular the theme of this session invites us to consider. We then want to share and reflect on some of the perspectives and answers to these queries that arise from the Africa Charter. We then consider their relevance for us, for WUN and ARUA, and then end with a number of propositions on concrete implications for how these networks, either individually or together, can take some of the implications forward. So, thinking about the historical context and the ways forward for equitable partnerships invites us to think about 2 major questions that sometimes get lost in what is the intensifying debate around equitable partnerships. The first is, what is equitability in research partnerships actually for? And then following on from that, what consequently does equity need to entail? How do we need to understand equity? Typically, in the debate, There are a number of answers that are raised in different forums to the first question, what is equitability in research partnerships for? We have answers that center on the fact that equitable research partnerships lead to an enhanced uptake of research findings, greater impact, a greater longevity of partnerships, greater integrity of investigations, or simply the right thing to do. And when we talk about what equity needs to entail, emphasis is placed on the need for fairness and mutuality in concrete arrangements for determining research agendas and approaches. Sue spoke to this. The division of labor, decision-making on budgets, what happens to samples, authorship of publications, and also capacity strengthening. The Charter adds to these perspectives and provides some answers that go a little bit further. And it does so by building on three sort of points of departure, if you like. It does build on the important equitable partnerships approaches and discussions that have intensified and that in some ways are ubiquitous in the higher education space globally. But it shifts the locus of consideration firmly to the Global South, specifically to Africa, and this is important. It shifts the locus of considering what equity needs to be and what equitable partnerships are for to Africa, to the Global South. And in doing so, it draws on long-established critical scholarship, anti-post-decolonial scholarship from Africa and the wider Global South, as well as systems thinking. And in doing so, the Charter highlights that when we talk about equitable research partnerships, we need to consider the global science and research ecosystem as a whole. And we need to acknowledge that that system is very skewed, is unjustly skewed, and that the positionings and the relations of Africa and the Global North in this system are very skewed. And we need to understand that this skewed system is not just a system that we can take as a given. We need to understand that it is unjust, that it reflects legacies of colonial histories, an uneven playing field in the production of scientific knowledge. And we need to recognize that this skewed system has repercussions for the prospects of African economies, for African soft power, for the position of Africa in the global political economy. So, the point, the need for equitability in research collaborations has to do about rebalancing this system overall. And the aim has to be to ensure that scholars, institutions, and knowledges produced from the continent take their rightful place in the global scientific effort. And this is an imperative not just as a matter of social justice. It is an imperative not only as a matter of advancing Africa's aspirations of taking its rightful place on the global stage. It is a matter also of ensuring that we enrich global scholarship, create a more potent global scholarship that allows us, affords us the opportunities to find solutions to the multiple crises that we face today. A scholarship that, among others, provides alternatives to the monochrome logic of Western thought that we're all working within, and that in many ways have brought us to the crises that we're facing today. So it is about shifting the system as a whole, rebalancing the system as a whole. And we need to understand that international research collaborations between Africa and the Global North in particular are a critically important entry and leverage point for doing that. Why? Because these collaborations dominate Africa's research effort. More than 80% of all research, scientific research outputs, indexed outputs, from the continent derive from collaborations with the global north. So if you change the ways in which these collaborations are configured, you have an opportunity to advance shifts in the system as a whole. What is needed for that? What is needed is a transformative mode of research collaborations. So these research collaborations have a potential to be transformative, and the mode in which they need to be configured has to be one where the multiple layers of power imbalance that exist currently in Africa Global North knowledge production are redressed. These multiple layers ranging from power imbalances that arise from the dominance of Western epistemologies, the dominance of Western languages in the production of knowledge, the dominance of Western theories and concepts in the production of new scientific knowledge, and with that, a look to the West as the site where scientific theory is produced, and Africa as a site where the theories are applied. Power imbalances that arise from the development frame that nearly always undergirds research, collaborative research that's done with Africa. The development frame, which implies almost always a unidirectional gaze from the global north to Africa to solve or address or investigate Africa's problems. Never is that gaze returned, and almost never is it reversed. And the development frame also limits the areas that are deemed relevant for investigation in the continent. They are important, of course. The development frame at the moment means the SDGs. They are important areas, but there might be many other areas that are critical for the continent's future that do not fall within the SDG frame, and that therefore are often left out in research collaborations. Another layer of imbalances arises, and this was a theme that you raised, both Peggy and Sue, the disparities in institutional capabilities and resourcing and infrastructures, data infrastructure, physical infrastructure. And then lastly, of course, the imbalances that arise at the level of the concrete collaboration arrangements that much of the equitable research partnerships debate has already highlighted and has already found ways to address. So, a transformative mode of research collaborations is needed to advance shifts in the system as a whole. But that's not all. There needs to be change in several domains to ensure that such a transformative collaboration mode is established as a benchmark and then gradually as standard practice. Change is required in individual consciousness and capabilities. Change is required in shared practice norms. What do we understand to be excellent research, good collaborative research? What are our norms around that? They need to shift. Of course, change is needed in the resource streams that make research possible. But above all, and this is what the Charter highlights, change is needed at the structural level. Change is needed in the policies, in the regulations, in the guidelines of higher education institutions, of university networks, of funders, of publishers, of those that set frames for research assessment, of governments ultimately. These are the rules of the game, and they have to change if a different mode of collaboration is to be embedded and sustained going forward. And the Charter's 6 aspirations speak directly to that. I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to hand over to Divine to reflect on the relevance of this, and then some implications and suggestions for your two networks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Isabella. We're just going to reflect on the relevance. So what's the relevance of this document? What's the relevance for this document globally? What's the relevance for this charter for the WUN and also for ARUA and others. The Charter, as Isabella has indicated, was launched in July last year in Windhoek, and over 100 signatories, and this is actually growing. And these are really major African global university networks, including the Coimbra, ASU, and AUN networks, learned societies, and also leading higher education institutions in Africa, in Europe, and North, and also in Latin America. And there's a growing interest and engagement with funders, publishers, and other stakeholders, to sign up to this document, which means that it's actually very important, and the aspirations contained in this document resonate with many. And the Charter has become, for us, a normative frame of reference for the higher education sector, for thinking about strategic and innovative research, and also equitable research relations globally, we think. And what needs to be done now after this signatory, like once you've signed, what happens, which is the question everybody is asking us. It's a work in progress, but what needs to be really done now and what we're working on is a translation into practice, from really changing and shifting from a community of interest to a community of action. And this involves critical reflection, review of existing collaboration practices within institutions and policy and regulatory frameworks, and also where we can try to extract some promising relationships, because there's always a tendency to critique or criticize without seeing what is working, and also where we can see the gaps and work with others to address these gaps. And to address these gaps, we are hoping to establish Pathfinder or pilot projects, or what we call demonstration projects, to translate the principles of the Charter into practice, and also to learn from this, and to continue undertaking further intellectual debates in order to refine the arguments of the Charter, and to continue building it. And what are the implications for the WUN and also for ARUA, and what are we asking for? We think there are a number of things that the WUN and ARUA can do. The first is that the WUN is uniquely positioned as a laboratory for advancing the translation of this Charter, precisely because of the way it's constituted and its own objectives. We think that the WUN and ARUA should incentivize collaborations that seek Charter alignment, especially through its research and other vehicles, the RDF. It should actively support reflection on the Charter that we are undertaking and the review of existing and past RDF projects and relationships, and also the policy architecture within the WUN. And we think that the collaboration between the WUN and also ARUA really provides an ideal platform to establish these Pathfinder projects, also to train early career researchers in collaborative and equitable and transformative partnerships, and also to foster new scholarly debates within the network and with other networks. And the Global Africa Group that has been meeting over the past 2 days, workshopping how to translate the Charter into its work, is ready to support this effort, And we think that there is value added to the WUN in adopting this Charter. It aligns with the strategic aims and values of the WUN. We think that it actually is forward-thinking, and it's a strategic repositioning to make it, attractive also to many other members to join. And we think it will energize also the network through rethinking the collaborations between different partners. And we are hoping that when you meet this week, and that you can actually make a decision to sign on to this Charter, also because some of the individual members of the WUN and Global Africa Group and outside are already signatories as individuals to the Charter. And yeah, that's what we bring on to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we will have a few minutes for questions, but the last speaker was talking about the Africa Charter and how this actually might be an instrument for us to put into practice the issue of transformative partnerships and transformative equitable partnerships. So at this point, I think the floor is open for questions and comments. Yes. Please introduce yourself and then speak.
My name is Evelyn. I am from the Mohammed VI Polytechnic University in Morocco. This is absolutely important. I'm going to speak from an individual researcher's point of view, and it has to be considered because researchers might stop doing things because of this issue of partnerships. From experience, the senior partner, they got what they wanted, 4-star papers that I wrote, but was not the senior author because of the politics. My country got the 2 policies that we developed, one on doctoral training and another one on internationalization of higher education. So both regions got something. But what did I get? I said I got the junior authorship. And then when we were doing the theory of changes and when we were presenting the policies for my country, I got to sit in the crowd, and my partners who were doing nothing, I did all the work, but just because they brought money and the name, they were sitting at the high table. So this is a really critical issue, and I'm actually in the process of writing a paper on partnerships, and I'm interested in what is going on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, please. At the back there. No, sorry. Oh, there was somebody first. Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Ritu Mawakela from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in the US. One of the issues I haven't heard in both of our panels this morning, as we've talked about issues of inclusivity and equity around partnerships and sort of in the higher education sector just generally, is sort of where the gender issue falls in. And I'm assuming that as we're talking more broadly about issues of inclusivity, it's implied. But I think, especially when we're looking at the higher education sector, we continue to see significant gender disparities and the continuing underrepresentation of women. Here I'm fully recognizing that gender is not just a woman issue, but certainly when we're talking about the higher education, the African higher education landscape, women continue to be significantly underrepresented in critical spaces in the higher education sector. So as we're thinking about partnerships and the role that partnerships play in particular, I'd be particularly interested and keen to have a conversation and about where we see the role of women being women scholars and academics as we plan and talk about the next generation of global problem solvers, the next generation of scholars and academics.
Thank you very much. That's a comment, not a question, or do you want somebody to speak to it? Okay. Okay. Please, I hope you're, and then I'll, yes.
Kia ora and good morning. It's Dawn Freshwater, the University of Auckland. Can I just start by thanking the panel? And I also just wanted to acknowledge what you just said, Evelyn. I don't think we should just let that sit there. I'm really sorry that you had that experience. My question is for Isabella. And Isabella, it goes back to your 12 principles and looking at the way in which we have to transform equitable access. And when you go back to those 12 principles, the first 2 around epistemologies, and then it gets to 3 to theories and concepts, we probably all understand in this room how profound a change that is required for that to be understood. But I'd like to hear your comments on this. Having lived in New Zealand now for 5 years and been right in the middle of a debate about what constitutes science, so for example, Mataranga Māori, traditional Māori wisdom, the debate is that it's not science because it doesn't follow the monochromatic logic that you referred to, and it's driven from different ways of knowing. And then bringing that to the fore at the same time as we're trying to deal with Māori data sovereignty, which is also part of the panel's deliberations this morning. Really, fundamentally, are we starting too far down the path if we're asking a question around equitable access and who asks the questions, Sue, and who sets the agenda, when in fact we really need to understand the different perspectives on what constitutes science if we're ever going to get to the point of really profoundly changing the notion of equitable partnerships. Love to hear your thoughts.
I think we'll stop now and you, Isabella and Sue. Thank you. Will you start? Who's starting?
Sue?
Mm-hmm. Me? You start. On that question and I'll come
On that
in.
question.
Yeah.
That is a very important question and a difficult one to answer. Actually, I don't have any good answers to that question. What I would say is that what the Charter has started doing is to highlight the areas in need of change and the principles around that. And what we need to do now collectively in different spaces is to think about what that actually means. Where do we need to start? Do we need to start, as you say, with the most fundamental of questions about what science is, or what different definitions of science are, and which ones are valued and which not? Do answers to that question have to be the same wherever you go? Might there be different answers in different contexts? So these are all queries that we need to reflect on, debate, discuss together. And part of the answers will come, I think, from attempting to actually develop projects that put the principles of the Charter into practice across different disciplinary fields, across the sciences, and learning from that, and realizing maybe what is relevant in one set of contexts and what is not relevant in another set of contexts. So it's a critical question. We have to jointly find answers to that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So I'm very happy to add to that. I wanted Isabella to speak to this epistemology first, because that really is your space. So I think the question you ask is really important. But I do think that in dealing with this big topic, it's very easy for us to set ourselves hard questions, which we will debate for the next 20 years and make no difference to our actions. So I do think that we have to walk a joint path here. And part of it is about actually thinking through things which are quite simple to reposition ourselves on, while at the same time taking the harder academic developmental space around, for instance, the nature of different knowledges. And I think that if we start with the hard questions, we're very likely to lose 75% of the research community who will think, well, I actually just don't want to deal with that question. And that question is relevant to somebody else, but not to me. We actually need everybody to walk this journey. And so I do think we need to set different tasks, some of which we can deal with today, some of which we'll deal with in a year's time, and some which will take a little bit longer. And I'd also like to reflect on the gender comment, because it was interesting to me that you raised that there, because we, in the spaces I work, we spend so much time thinking through gender and demographics in general. I think in this discussion on equitable partnerships, we often are thinking of how the groups work with each other, and we're not necessarily in the granularity of who's in those groups. So maybe it's an interesting, because we're doing that in many other places, so maybe it's an interesting thought as to, it's almost like a set of concentric circles as to the individual versus the team versus the interaction. And I think we could work with those ideas. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Tansy Jessup from the University of Bristol. I've been struck by so many things this morning in the talks and just wanted to ask a question around the structural issues and the notion that Peggy raised of scientific diplomacy. I mean, the striking things for me, I loved your answer, Sue, around the dual path, that we need to be doing both and concrete and more difficult things. But for me, the point raised by Peggy earlier about academies and universities exercising scientific diplomacy was important in the context that 198 out of 1 million people in Africa are researchers, whereas nearly 5,000 and 9,000 in European countries per million. But also in the context of your comment, Sue, about visas and resources that you've raised, Isabella. So I just wondered if you could speak to the idea of, what role we can play in scientific diplomacy in an environment where certainly in the UK, there's quite an adversarial relationship between government and universities. So where to with scientific diplomacy as one of the actions we can take? Thank you.
I think so.
That's a nice hard question. So I think that there are two ways that we need to be working with the scientific diplomacy. The one is putting our voice out there and just raising the impact of the decisions which are being made by our governments, etc. I think often our governments are addressing one issue and they're taking an angle on it, and they're not necessarily thinking of the impacts that follow down the train. So I think that's the one side. And I think then we have to work around some of these issues. I think the example I gave you was a conference on ecosystems, which dealt with wild meat, so very much around not ecosystems from areas of development. Then we've got to be careful about where we host those conferences. We need to put them in places where people can get to. So I think we kind of need to work at it from the two sides.
Okay, you had a question here? Yes.
Thank you so much. Again, Andre McDonald from the University of Alberta in Canada. So in Canada, we have First Nations principles on ownership, control, access, and possession, right? So I wanted to get your thoughts on, does that exist for Africa and for African communities and research that happens here? And if yes, how do you, to use a pejorative word, enforce that? And to use a more positive word, motivate others to follow on those principles. And I would say this could be, for you, Sue, just based on the conversations that you had. But I'd like to hear that also through the lens of enforcement or motivation, as well, especially with regards to the charter, right? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that might have to be the last question. So.
Great.
Because I'm looking at the time.
Just very quickly. I do think the nature in which we handle the knowledges of people, of groupings of people, differ depending on the way in which the country's demographics are set up. So in both Canada and Australia, where I'm now living, and New Zealand, the First Nations people are now minority people. And that's a completely different way in which we handle policy to in most African countries where the First Nations people are majority people. I don't think we have those kind of policies, etc. But I may be wrong. So I'll leave my response at that.
Yes.
Does Isabella want to
Yeah, maybe
speak
just
to
to add to that, that there are a number of frameworks that begin to speak to the issues that you raise, but they are not very well known, they're siloed, and if you look for them, you will find them, and you might choose to orient your research accordingly, but if you don't look for them, you are not going to be faced with them. And to your question of enforcement or motivation, there is currently no mechanism that seeks to enforce a particular way of working, and this is a question that we thought about quite hard and quite carefully around the Charter. Is this something that ought to be developed into a normative framework that people sign up to, and then they're accountable for showing that they're working in accordance with the Charter principles? Do we enforce researchers and colleagues to work in accordance with the Charter principles? And we felt that at this stage, the more important thing is to emphasize the motivation, to invite researchers and institutions to embark with us on the journey of trying to develop the research principles and aspirations of the Charter into practice, because there is a sense that the arguments underpinning it are compelling. As Ernest has said on several occasions, nobody in their right mind could be against the Charter. So there is a sense that this is the moment, the Charter calls for change whose time has arrived. And we can build on that to motivate and encourage constituencies in different spaces to embark on that journey. Enforcement might end up being counterproductive, and that's not what you want. Yeah.
And I think on that note, we will come to the end of this session. But I think what's come out of it is how complex getting into equitable partnerships can be, and the reasons for the challenges that we have ahead of us. But what is clear is that there are simple steps. It is a journey, and we have a charter that if we all work together with this charter, we might get where we're going sooner or later, probably later than sooner, but we will learn lessons along the way. So what I will want to echo is to ask many of you here and for WUN to be a signatory onto this charter so that we can work together for transformative, equitable partnerships. Thank you very much.